We just getting started, baby. Did anybody see what Mr. Wardell Steph Curry did to the Portland Trailblazers? They were nobodies. They beat the Giants. Trash. They beat the Broncos. Trash. If you ever watched Dragon Ball Z, my man's was Super Saiyan. I couldn't wear this until we actually caught a dub. And he did all of this damage in 36 minutes. Let that sink in. They beat the Eagles, trash. The Cowboys, trash. The Bengals, trash. The Jaguars, trash. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here on Rob's 2 Cents. My good people, my good people. Hello, world. Welcome back to the show that's hot with your boy Rob Scott. This is Rob's 2 Cents. What's going on, everybody? Good to see y'all again. Good to talk to y'all again. I feel like this is beginning to be a reoccurring theme here on the show. Hope you all are being safe in this weather. As you know, here in Chicagoland and most of the Midwest area, we getting hit with a lot of snow. Hope all those who have to travel in the snow continue to drive safely. This is not a race. This ain't NASCAR. Get to your destination safely. Hey, sometimes slow and steady wins the race. Want to get right into some great sports conversation because, as you know, the NFL season is over. And yes, I will be keeping you up to date on the offseason moves to the best of my ability. Right now, this is prime time basketball talk. As you know, anybody who knows me, I love football. Don't get me wrong. That's a sport. That's a sport for men. Okay, you have to have a different mind state to play the game of football. But when it comes to the game of basketball, that's my first love. There's a certain physicality to that game as well. Also, a certain finesse to it. And then let's just be real, man. If you live in places like I live, like Chicago, those who live in LA, you have certain superstars who get you into that game. And, you know, of course, that was Michael Jordan for Chicagoans, and more particular, my boy Cole right there, you know, as I started to get older and understand the game. And we got a lot of basketball talk for you on this show, man. Come tune in to the hottest sports conversation in the nation. Let's jump right into it. We got to talk about the Brooklyn Nets, okay? As you know, Brooklyn has been making headlines since the James Harden trade, with their lack of defense and the things that we've seen from this team has not been what we've expected so far. As far as we know that they're going to outscore people, we didn't know their defense was going to be this bad. But later on, as they started to gel and get used to each other, I will have to say Brooklyn's defense has been a lot better. But they lost KD for a couple of games. As you know, over the weekend, they welcomed him back from those COVID-related protocols as they went head-to-head against the Golden State Warriors. As you know, he was on leave due to some COVID complications that didn't involve him rather than someone that was close to him. And this was an anticipated matchup. You know, we were excited to see KD once again back on the court with James Harden and Kyrie. We were also ready to see what Steph can do this go around against the Brooklyn Nets, because as we remember, the first time they met, James Harden wasn't a member of this team yet. Steph was still getting in his groove. Draymond wasn't officially back yet. So now, with the tear that Steph has been on, with his name being mentioned in MVP conversations, this was a game matchup that you had to X marked in on your calendar, okay? But the Warriors are still without two of their big men in Kevon Looney and in James Wiseman. So with that being said, we kind of expected the Nets to go bonkers on them, and that's exactly what happened as the Nets were able to defeat the Golden State Warriors 134-117. Let's look at the box scores, see what went down. Durant had 20 points, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks. James Harden continuing to show why he's the point guard of this team, as Kyrie wanted to point that out to us, had 19.6 assists, 8 rebounds, 3 steals. Kyrie now playing in his natural role at the shooting guard, 23 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds. Hold on, let me get back to that statement I just said. Okay, so it came out that after the win versus the Warriors, Kyrie flat out told the media that, hey, he went to James Harden, he pointed at him and said, you know what? You're the point guard for this team, okay? I will take on the role and duties of the shooting guard. He had to, I guess, bow down or succumb to the fact that James Harden is indeed a more of a natural point guard than Kyrie Irving is, who's just a natural scorer. This man gets buckets. It's just funny because we kind of already knew that James Harden was going to take on that role in order for this team to be successful. But the fact that Kyrie had to let people know that this conversation took place, more power to you, my boy. Steph Curry had 27 points. He was 10 of 17, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, but just was not enough for these three dynamic players that are on the Brooklyn Nets. Now, prior to this victory, the Nets were definitely missing KD. Now, before KD had to leave the game in the second half back on February 5th against the Raptors due to those COVID complications, the Nets were 5-1 in their previous 6 games. So they began to get on a little bit of a win streak, as I said. They began to gel together. They actually put together some pretty good defensive games. As we're starting to find out, they just need to learn each other. They need to know each other's spots. But the Nets are going to be just fine. I mean, we're talking about 3 transcendent players, and this is probably the best trio of players that we've ever seen assembled in this game, known as the NBA. Now, granted, the loss that they did allow to happen was against the Wizards, in which we saw that Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook was able to score 6 points in 7 seconds and was able to beat the Nets. And I might I mention that the Washington Wizards are the worst team in the East still currently at the moment. And at that time, they were the worst team in the entire NBA. They allowed the Washington Wizards to beat them again, scoring 6 points in 7 seconds, 149 to 146 was your final score. However, the Nets captured a signature win that next night out as they went against the Los Angeles Clippers. And the final score being 124 to 120. Now, this was a game in which Kyrie went crazy. He went for 39 points. But let's get back on track here. In that Raptors game, as mentioned, the Nets looked like they were gonna, like they had that game handily taken care of. KD did not start that game against the Raptors, as I mentioned. What they said was that it was an associate of his that caught or contracted the COVID virus. However, his tests were inconclusive. His or her tests were inconclusive. So because they were inconclusive, they didn't know whether or not they wanted KD to play. Tests kept coming back inconclusive, so they decided to let KD go in a little later in the first quarter. He played a little bit of the first, played a little bit of the second. Finally, they said that the test results came back positive for that associate of Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant had to leave the game immediately, go into quarantine. However, it was a weird situation because Kevin Durant also had took a COVID test and it came back negative. So that was just a little bit of a confusion. However, he left, did not play any of the second half. The Raptors went on to win that game. Now, they would then drop their next 2 games after that with KD now sidelined due to these protocols. They dropped the game at Philadelphia. They dropped the game at Detroit. Now, however, behind a strong game from Kyrie, who had 35, the Nets were able to get a win against the Indiana Pacers. And right now, the Pacers are 4th in the East. So that's not a give-me win. The Indiana Pacers, even though they've been stricken by, trades, and then the trade that they bought in and Karis LeVert not able to go, likely to miss the rest of the season. They're still competing hard. Now, we learned after the victory against the Warriors that the Brooklyn Nets will once again be without KD. We just found out that he injured his calf, I believe. So he he injured his hamstring. So he has a mild hamstring strain. He's going to be out at least for the next 2 games. These next 2 games now are going to be pretty critical and going to show us what the Nets can do without Kevin Durant. They're going to be against the rising Sacramento Kings and the surging Phoenix Suns. As we know, these are two teams right now making a statement in the Western Conference right now, especially Sacramento. Looks like we're watching the rise of De'Aaron Fox right before our eyes. We already knew he's one of the fastest players in the NBA, but it seems now he's able to play at that speed at his own pace, and he's still able to make some spectacular shots, even going at full speed. So, they have some nice complementary players over there in Buddy Hield and so forth. So, the Sacramento Harrison Barnes. So the Sacramento Kings are making a name for themselves out there in the West. Of course, we know what Chris Paul has done with these Phoenix Suns. Not saying it's primarily on Chris Paul. The reason that they are sitting right now, I want to say in fourth or fifth in the West. However, Devin Booker has continued to make a statement, and now that he has some help at the backcourt position, it's going to be interested to see how far the Phoenix Suns can go. Excuse me. So, with those two games coming up, the Nets could be in big trouble. Hopefully, KD will be back for the game that they have against the Lakers. I wouldn't be so quick to rush him back if he still feels some pain in that hamstring, just due to the fact we just found out that AD is going to be gone for a little bit of time, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the up and coming segments. But the Lakers will be going face to face against the Nets on February 18th on Thursday Night Basketball on TNT. So Brooklyn has played with 17 different starting lineups this year, which is the most in the NBA alone. They're tied with the Wizards for doing so. The Nets are 9-3 when they have their big three on the court. So the teams better watch out for when KD, Kyrie, and James Harden are completely healthy. I still think their biggest competition in the East is going to be Philadelphia. I think right now Embiid is playing at a Superman level right now. He's definitely in MVP form. And if they don't get a big in these next upcoming weeks before the trade deadline, I don't see DeAndre Jordan really being a factor against Joel Embiid. I think he's going to get him in foul trouble. Then you're in trouble, because who are you going to put on Joel Embiid, who is such a big man, a 7 foot, a 7-footer with weight on him, and he looks to be in great shape right now. So the Brooklyn Nets, I think they're going to be just fine. We did see right in that game on Friday that they won, that they can, I think it was Thursday or Friday, but they can play with that game they beat the Pacers in. Kyrie and James Harden can play together. So we're going to be keeping our eyes on the Brooklyn Nets and their injuries going forward. But speaking of injuries, as mentioned, I was going to talk about what's going on with Anthony Davis. The Los Angeles Lakers now are going to be without Anthony Davis at least for the next couple of days, as he re-aggravated his Achilles. Now, actually, it's going to be more than a couple of days, because he did have his MRI tonight on Monday, and Anthony Davis, they say they're going to reevaluate him in about 2 to 3 weeks. But what it looks like he did was he strained his calf, and he's having some problems with his Achilles where it's flaring up. I believe they said he has tendinosis, which means that he has some deteriorative tissue around that Achilles area. So it's inflamed and giving him some problems. As we saw, he left yesterday on Sunday night game against the Denver Nuggets. He tried to do a dribble drive move on the Joker, Nikola Jokic. And when he planted his foot the wrong way, he immediately went to grab that heel. We all seen in cases of, KD in that last finals. We've seen other players in the past have terrible Achilles injuries. When they go for that ankle, when they grab that ankle, that's not usually a good sign. So luckily he had his MRI back, got it back today. They said there was no rupture in the Achilles, but he does have a calf strain, and he does have some inflammation going on with that Achilles area. So we saw that when he went out. He didn't come back and play in the second half of the Nuggets game. They lost to the Lakers 122 to 105. I'm sorry, they beat the Lakers 122 to 105. The Lakers dropped that game to the Denver Nuggets. Now, the Lakers have shown that they can play without AD. As we saw last week, they had back-to-back games against the Thunder because that's when AD first started experiencing those issues with his Achilles. And he's gonna it's gonna put some strain on LeBron now because LeBron hasn't really had any rest. Even though they were able to pull out those two back-to-back victories against the Thunder, a lot of people have been talking about the fact that LeBron hasn't taken any days off since the season began. So he's not in a position right now to have to take over the helm for the Los Angeles Lakers without feeling that strain on his body. So I'm suggesting that hopefully LeBron doesn't overwork himself. I don't think right now going for first place is a goal that the Lakers should have. Right now, what you need to do is try to reach the finish line as healthy as possible. Try to stay above sixth place so that way you're not caught in the play-in situation. However, don't overstress LeBron James. Give him some days where he can take off because he is older. So you have to remember he took off those 5 months or 3 to 5 months when the NBA found out about the COVID and everybody went to quarantine, came back, played in the bubble, played in the regular season to finish it off in the bubble, played in the postseason of the bubble, played in the NBA finals in the bubble, only had about 2 months to rest right before he was back into a 72 game season this year. So, and LeBron has not had any games off. He has not had any load management. So right now the Lakers they need to be trying to do their best to keep everybody intact. They also need to be trying to make some offseason moves because not offseason moves, but some moves before the trade deadline as well. Because as we look at Marc Gasol, that is not going to be a person that's going to defend some of these bigger bigs in the NBA. You have to look at the Porzingis, the Nikola Jokic, the Joel Embiids of the world, the Rudy Goberts of the world. So right now we're going to see without Anthony Davis, there's going to be a gap in the Lakers' presence in the paint. And they need to be looking to make some moves as well because without Anthony Davis, they're not going to win any championship. And on top of that, they're going to be in big trouble for some years to come because we know Anthony Davis has tended to be injury prone. So hopefully the Lakers are able to just sit AD out. Let him get as much rest as he can. We're happy that it's not a torn Achilles or a ruptured Achilles. However, it's all going to be a matter of how much pain can he take and how much of the swelling and things can he do by staying off of his feet. Can he reduce on that ankle? Going to be paying attention to the Los Angeles Lakers, man, because right now injuries and COVID seem to be the theme for the month of February. But the Lakers are not the only team that's in trouble. There has been some trouble in Beantown because Boston has not looked well this season. Now, this is a real big highlight of this show because Boston was so promising. As you remember, a couple years ago, they were able to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals without Kyrie Irving. And since then, they continue to be on this downward trend, I should say. Because if you look right now, they're a 500 team. They're 13-13. So they're currently in fifth place in the East. However, they're 3-7 in their last 10 games, including 2 of 3 in their last 5 games. And that downward trend continues to point to the point guard position because Kemba has not been consistent in his play. Let's look at the last 5 games for the Boston Celtics. Now, against the Los Angeles Clippers, which resulted in a win, Kemba had 24 points, 4 assists, 1 turnover. He was 9 of 19 from the field, including 2 of 7 from the 3-point line. It was okay shooting. Not the best shooting, but thank God for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But if we look against the Suns, they lost. He had 14 points, 2 assists, 4 rebounds, and 3 turnovers. How he got that 14 points? He was 420. He was 420 from the field, 4 of 11 from the 3-point line. So he only hit those three balls. Those 4 3 balls, and he missed every other shot that he took. Not to mention, you took more field goal attempts than you made, than you had in points. That's not a good thing. And then you look against the Suns, which was also, if you look against the Utah Jazz, which is the best team in the league, that was also a loss. He had 7 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds. He was 2 of 12 from the field, 1 of 4 from the 3-point line. Against the Raptors, they won. He got back to some winning ways, shooting 21 points, had a pretty decent game there. 3 assists, 5 rebounds, but he had 5 turnovers. He was 5 of 12 from the field, 5 of 8 from the 3-point line. And then against the Washington Wizards, they also lost, but this was probably the best game he had since that losing stretch. He had 25 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, again had 5 turnovers. He was 9 of 18 from the field, 4 of 7 from the 3-point line. So he started to get better in his shooting, but there's just been inconsistent play at that point guard position. Now the Celtics are 3-5 since losing Marcus Smart, which was a huge loss to them because Smart is going to bring you that toughness from that position, and he's going to be defense. As you know, if Kemba is not being the offensive threat that he is, that he's normally known to be on the court, he's going to become a liability because he's just too small to stay in front of great scores, even to stay in front of mediocre scores, because he's just a little guy going to be able to push Kemba out the way and beat him to the spot. Now, Jeff Teague has also was an offseason move. He was bought in, but he's not helping. He's just averaging 6 points, 2 assists on the season. Now, Boston is hoping that they're going to get a little taste of Charlotte Kemba, and hope that he makes an appearance before this season is over with, because they're going to need Kemba to step up big if they have any aspirations of making some noise in the playoffs, because right now, Boston is looking like a first-round elimination team. Now, I have some quick hits before we end this show. I want to talk about Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony has turned back the hands of time, ladies and gentlemen. In the last week, he helped Portland to a 4-game winning streak with 2 signature wins over the Dallas Mavericks and the best team in the East, the Philadelphia 76ers. Melo went crazy in Philly, scoring 24 points, which was a season high. He was 9 of 15 shooting from the field and 4 of 5 from the 3-point line. He also passed the Big O, Oscar Robertson, on the all-time scoring list, with Carmelo Anthony currently sitting at 12th now. Carmelo Anthony. That boy Carl. And I'm happy for Melo, because people have Melo wrote off. We got to remember, just a couple years ago, Melo was not even on an NBA team. And I'm happy to see what he's done as he came into Portland. He's brought new life into Portland, gave them that down fourth quarter scoring, that in the clutch scoring that you so need, more than just Damian Lillard and CJ, especially with CJ being out now with injury. They're going to need Carmelo to step up now more than ever. And like I said, Portland's been making a little noise out there in the West. So we're going to keep our eyes on Melo and the Portland Trailblazers, as we saw against that Mavericks team. It was Dame time, and Dame Dollar always comes in from the clutch. I don't care if you think it was a good shot or not. He called game. And the Los Angeles Clippers has been hit by this injured bug. Let's look at what the Los Angeles Clippers have went through. Now, they were already without Paul George, who's been out with a sore foot since February 3rd. So with Paul George out, they've only had Kawhi. They've been able to sustain and play pretty well without Paul George. However, now Kawhi is out. They said that he also has a calf strain, I believe. Yo, he has a leg contusion. I apologize. And there is no expected timetable for when he will return and no expected timetable for when Paul George will return. So right now, the Clippers are not looking so good. Especially they have some good games coming up. They have the Jazz on their upcoming schedule and they have the Nets on their upcoming schedule. So they're going to need one of those guys to come back to help out. As said before, no timetable on when Paul George or Kawhi Leonard will be back, and that's going to be a huge blow to the Los Angeles Clippers. Speaking a little bit on NFL news, J.J. Watt has been released from the Houston Texans. As you know, he's been wanting a trade. He's been wanting to be released from the team, and they finally granted his wish. He is now a free agent out there on the NFL market. Three teams I believe he should consider because I believe at this point in his career he should be trying to at least go for a championship or contend for one. So he should be looking at either the Green Bay Packers, the reigning champions right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or the Kansas City Chiefs, who I believe will be right back in the Super Bowl hunt come next NFL season. Also, on a sad note, we like to send our condolences out to the family of Vincent Jackson, who was a former wide receiver in the NFL. Vincent was found dead at his hotel room out there in Florida where he was staying. As we know, he spent 12 seasons with the NFL, with his first 7 seasons being with the San Diego Chargers, and his final 5 seasons being with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, Vincent was a hell of a receiver. I can recall my friends as we would play Madden. I had one of my boys in particular who would always pick the San Diego Chargers on NFL Madden for LaDainian Tomlinson, but I remember getting caught off guard by Vincent Jackson quite a few times when he would play. So our thoughts and prayers are with his family. Based off what I read about him, he was a good man, big into supporting the military, big into investing back into his community. I believe he was even an honorary deputy in Hillsborough County out there in Florida, where he unfortunately passed away at. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family, friends, and loved ones. And we hope that you guys can find peace and closure through these tough times. And as before we end the show, as you know, I have been doing a tribute to athletes of color who has made major contributions to the fight against inequality and racial injustice. And how do we talk about players and what they've contributed without talking about Colin Kaepernick? If we look at Colin Kaepernick, he's still a current NFL free agent. He played 6 seasons with the San Francisco 49ers as a quarterback. He holds the NFL record for most rushing yards by a QB in a single game, which was 181 yards. And he has the most yards by a quarterback in a single postseason at 264 yards. He even led his team to a Super Bowl in 2013. I believe that was Super Bowl 47, where they lost 34-31 to the Baltimore Ravens, an historic game in which two coaches, both head coaches, were brothers. And then also that was the retirement game for the legendary linebacker Ray Lewis. Now, back on August 26 in 2016 in a preseason game against the Green Bay Packers, Colin Kaepernick stayed seated during the singing of the national anthem. It wasn't until September 1st of 2016 that the world began to take notice to Colin's quiet protest. After having a conversation with Nate Boyer, who was a former NFL player and a former Green Beret in the U.S. military, Colin began kneeling instead of sitting to show respect to the military, but also to still get his message across. Now, a lot of people began to call for Kaepernick's job because they didn't understand why he was disrespecting the flag, disrespecting the military. Colin Kaepernick simply replied, that was not his intentions to disrespect anything about this country, rather than to bring awareness to what was happening in this country right under your noses. That men and women of color were always continuously having fatal outcomes when it came to the hands of police and law officials. We look at people like Mike Brown, people like Sandra Bland, people like Alton Sterling, people like Philando Castile. And the names go on and on and on. And what Kaepernick wanted to do was bring awareness to the fact that if you are a person of color, that when you have an interaction with a police officer, sometimes it doesn't always end with you getting a ticket and going home. Sometimes it can be fatal. And he put his job on the line, put his livelihood on the line to bring attention and awareness to that fact. Now, it's ironic that in these current days, we know that he's been blackballed from the NFL. Now, he had a case against the NFL in which he won, and more power to him, because I know that he wasn't doing that for any other intention than for what it was meant to be for, and that was to bring awareness to the racial injustice happening to people of color in this country, especially when it came to the hands of police authority figures. Now, Colin Kaepernick had a campaign with Nike, a very successful campaign in which they stood up and brought several powerful messages regarding standing up for what you believe in and continuing the good fight against racial injustice. Colin Kaepernick continues to this day to be a civil rights person, an activist out here in the streets, standing and marching and fighting with the people as police brutality still continues to be an issue today. As we see more recently with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, who I believe due to this quarantine and this pandemic, people have had no other choice but to see what's going on, especially being stuck in their homes and not working. You had no choice but to turn on the TV and pay attention to what we've been saying all along. We're not lying when we say that there's a different treatment in how we're treated as individuals in this great country known as the United States of America. All Colin Kaepernick wanted you to do was to open your eyes and see. And it's very funny that the same people that said he was disrespecting the flag and say he was disrespecting our military actually had the gall and the nerve to storm the Capitol walls of this great nation's capital, of a place that holds the very Constitution that you guys claim to hold so dearly, that you were able to storm in there with complete disregard for law officials, complete disregard for police, and complete disregard for the military. That was terrorist acts that you guys did. But you guys were the same people that said that Colin Kaepernick was disrespecting this nation when in fact you did something so egregious that you still wonder why you're on the no-fly zone. Now, Roger Goodell, who's the NFL commissioner, tried to make amends with Colin Kaepernick by telling the other owners to please give him a shot as a free agent and also issuing public apologies to Kaepernick and what he was doing and why he was doing it for. I hope one day we do get to see Colin Kaepernick at least play one more game in the NFL, as that's something he deserves. Being the fact that he put his whole career on the line just to give some people like me a chance. I appreciate you, Colin Kaepernick, and whether a lot of people know it or not, his great contributions will go down as a great movement in the black community, especially being that he was somebody who was young but knew that his stage and platform could make a difference just by letting his voice be heard, or sometimes just taking a knee when they start to sing that song. No disrespect to our country, and we would never want to disrespect our country because we are residents of this country. We are citizens of this country. We live in this country. But all we ask for is that while we live in this country, give us the respect we deserve, as America was not just built by the hands and hard work of white men, but of black men and women as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to the hottest sports conversation in the nation. This has been the show that's hot with your boy Rob Scott. This has been Rob's 2 cents. See you next time, y'all. We gone. There's a bigger fight going on. There's a much bigger agenda than the streets. And I know sometimes it's hard to see that far in front of us, but we have to look past the illusions, look past the delusions of grandeur, and look at the bigger picture. We need to become better versions of ourselves each and every day. Fight for what you believe in. Because if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. We just getting started, baby. You guys know the slogan now. Hope you all have a great evening. And we go.